Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Hi, welcome back to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Stan Miller. My guest today is Randy Gravitt. Randy is the author of a book called Winning Begins at Home, and he's a partner in a coaching consulting company called Lead Every Day. Randy, I think you live in Atlanta, Georgia, and you're very welcome here today.
Well, thank you, Stan. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you and your audience, and thankful for all you do to try to help encourage leaders. It's great.
So, Randy, I want to just jump right into what it is that you do. I want to hear about Lead Every Day, what it does, what its mission is, what your role is in that.
Yeah, well, I actually started this thing about 11 years ago. I was trying to see, can I make a living trying to help leaders get better? And I was on my own at the time, and it just kind of went crazy. The first year, it went very well, and then it just has grown from there. And I think we had our team retreat last week with about 14 of us, and we've got another dozen or so that help us with the back end admin kind of stuff and all the stuff that we're doing. But we basically help organizations try to get better. We say there's three things. We want to help people become better leaders. We want to help them improve their team's performance. And ultimately, a lot of people that are listening are in charge of an organization, and we want to everybody at every level to strengthen their organizations. We think doing good is still good business. And so I know you've got a lot of people listening who are in the business world, and anytime we get a chance to hang out with leaders, we love it. And so we do a lot of workshops, coaching, training, keynotes, all kind of stuff. And we're just having a lot of fun. It's great.
So let's, I'm not going to ask you to share all of your secrets with me here. We don't, even in the 30 minutes or so we have, I'm sure we don't have time to do that, but I would like to get the Reader's Digest version of the kind of wisdom and insight that you guys would bring. So tell me about the people who are particularly motivated to come to a training session that you guys conduct. Tell me about the person sitting in a seat. Who are they, and what motivations do they bring when they come to sit with you guys and learn from you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll give you a little bit of a flyby. So a lot of our content we've created through the years for Chick-fil-A. A lot of people that listen probably are familiar with Chick-fil-A. They've got a lot of fans, and so we've done.
I had lunch there today, actually.
Okay, that's great. So I know the family will be appreciative of that, and your local operator would as well. I guess we've done more than 200 events for them over the last decade now. They've been one of our core clients. We created a lot of our content to get to the heart of your question for them. And what we've done is just really tried to address their biggest felt need every year. And your audience will definitely resonate with let's just take the first one. I mentioned trying to become a better leader. We find leaders everywhere. They end up in what we call leadership quicksand. They've not forgotten how to lead, but so many times we get bogged down in the details of the job or emails, or there's technology now. And sometimes it's even success. I mean, there's just stuff that gets us bogged down, and it keeps us from leading on the high ground. And so we've created content to help leaders with that and do workshops around that. Another hot topic is how do we find great people? Chick-fil-A had asked that several years ago, and we created our Talent Magnet content for them on that. And really cool research project with about 7,000 people participating, and all 50 states and ages 15 to 65. And we discovered the things that top talented people are looking for. That really can help anybody become an employer of choice. And so that's a hot button. People love that. Engagement would be another example. A lot of times people are struggling to keep their people engaged. I think the statistics stand now are about 72% of people don't really care about what their boss cares about. And we hear these terms like quiet quitting and the great resignation, but it's real. If you're leading a group of people and they're not leaned in, I always say there's nothing worse than your people leaving you except for one thing, and that's if they leave you and they don't tell you. They actually stay and they're still on the payroll, they're still taking up space, but they're hurting morale, and you can't go to you can't go to a positive place with negative people. And then we have other stuff on execution, and we're teaching people to do the right thing the right way every time. You can imagine in a restaurant, they've got tens of thousands of transactions that go on every day, and people want the right order, right? They want to get they order a spicy sandwich, they don't want to get a Cool Wrap. So it's, we're trying to teach people all that stuff, and there's some ways that you can do that. And that's basically the way we spend a lot of our time, is training companies and organizations to chase high performance. They're capable of so much more than they think they are.
Okay, so let's go back. I heard a list of 3 or 4 things there, and let's go back to the first one, and let's I know you wrote a book about this, and I'm guessing that I haven't read your book yet, but I'm guessing that a lot of the wisdom that you share in workshops, we would also be able to get if we read the book, right? But having not read the book, and if somebody is listening here, let's go back and let's just take just a quick tour of what the still wisdom. You identified several things, and let's start at the list there and see what, if we unpack that, what's a takeaway that we could have with some of those points that you made. You were talking about employees that quit and don't tell you. They stay on the payroll, they still get paid. They're just not engaged with you. So if what would be the elevator speech you would give an employer who said, hey Randy, what in a sentence or two, is there something I could do that would change that dynamic? What would you say?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the book. I'll talk about that in a second, but all those lanes that I talked about, we've created resources for all that, really, in the corporate space or in the business space, schools, churches, all kind of businesses trying to get better. But specifically to your question on engagement, a couple of examples here. We've discovered, we did a bunch of research on all this stuff and had teams from Stanford University and all kind of people, and we got to study the best companies really in the world. Chick-fil-A gave us access to that, and we've connected with the Navy SEALs and Clemson football, and on and on and on, all these really great organizations, that Cirque du Soleil, all kind of, and we find that the companies that are able to keep their people engaged do a couple of things. First of all, they're really great at connection. They make sure that people are connected to the vision. And I think sometimes if you're a leader, it's easy to lose sight of the vision and actually not understand just how important that vision is for not just you, but the people around you, but the people all the way to the front line. And I think sometimes when we get busy and go back to that leadership quicksand that we talked about, if that quicksand is grabbing at you, things begin to get a little fuzzy. It's almost, I use the example, if I'm driving down the highway, Stan, I like to drive probably faster than I should, but the faster you go, the harder it is to read the signs, right? The signs get a little fuzzy, you can miss your exit, all that kind of stuff. And I think if your business is going really fast, the same thing is true. If the vision is fuzzy to you, it's probably blurry to the people who are following you. And so that connection is a really big deal to keep people connected to the vision. But not just the vision, keep them connected to the customers. Your customers, no matter what industry you're in, you really are in the people business. You may sell chicken, or you may be in real estate, or you may be a financial planner or a lawyer. Any of that stuff, if you forget the fact that you're relationally in the people business, you're gonna struggle. And keeping your people connected to your customers or your partners is a really big deal. And then keeping your team connected to each other. That's just another example. We found when people understand these 3 levels of connection, people who are connected, it's just like it becomes really sticky, and people will stay leaned in, more engaged if they're connected to the vision, to their teammates, and to their customers. So that would be one example.
Let me stop you there. Yeah. So without revealing names, I wouldn't ask you to do that, but give me an example of somebody who actually does that really well, and what do they do that makes that work?
Yeah, well, I think there are lots of organizations and lots of companies who do that. I'll give you one group that we talked to. I mentioned Clemson's football team. We had an opportunity to sit down with some of their coaches, and they talked about the ways that the coaches were trying to really stay connected to the players And they had specific ways that they did that every day. They're having these check-ins, and they're, grading practice film every day and discussing progress and trying to execute at a really high level, obviously very competitive. And when we did the research, Clemson was in the midst of winning a couple of national championships in a row. And so it was just fascinating to talk to an organization about their level of connection. And that, I remember one of the years that they won, the first year they won the championship. At the end of the championship game, massive win. It was incredible. And they stuck a microphone in Dabo's face and said, "Hey, how did you do this? This is kind of, it's been building toward this, but it happened." And he said, "It's just one word. It's love." And that doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Are like, love doesn't win games. We know that. But there's so many times we see this happen. Sports is a good example. You can have the team with the highest payroll. We see this happen all the time. Rarely do they win the championship. It's everybody has good players. But how do you create a competitive advantage? That connection, I think so many times, community, some people would call it. Do we really care about each other? Do we know each other's story in our workplace? And the organizations we saw over and over, the Navy SEALs talked about this, that brotherhood, people do die for flags and freedom. We had Veterans Day recently. That's true. But they said over and over, you die for your friend and your family, the person in the foxhole beside you, that mindset that we're talking about. So that connection is a huge part of engagement. And then I'll just mention a couple other. Affirmation is big. I think so many times we think that we have to work with somebody or this is our team. People need to be affirmed. They need to be validated. I always say more than they need to be tolerated. I think every single person, Truett Cathy, who founded Chick-fil-A, always said back in the day, how do you know if a person needs encouragement? His punchline was, if they're breathing, they need encouragement. So I think there's so much truth to that. And affirmation really causes, when people feel affirmed, they actually lean in, they're more engaged. One more, responsibility would be one. I think sometimes we're afraid if we give people more responsibility, they're going to lean out and check out on us. That's actually not true. When you give people real responsibility, you give them ownership for something, they actually will rise to the occasion a lot of times if you'll train them and coach them and support them in the right way. So yeah, the engagement work was a lot of fun. But all those things that I mentioned, we've created resources for all that. I'll say
let's go back.
You
mentioned 4 channels. We talked about one. There's some others though. Let's go back and in the brief time we have, I want to capture as much wisdom and insight as possible here in the time we have, because I think if our listeners hear the summary of that maybe they'll be more inclined to actually buy your book or call you guys up and say, let's do some work together. So let's go back to the other channels and let's drill into that a bit.
Yeah, so I'll just start, which this will tie into the book. I'll start with the Become a Better Leader piece. So we do stuff on, living back on the high ground or leading on the high ground, getting out of the quicksand. We got stuff that we do training for leader effectiveness. I think self-leadership is the hardest. The hardest person I'm going to lead is me. It's if you can lead you got a good shot of helping people around you. But a lot of leaders don't really pay attention to that. When the book came about, the Winning Begins at Home book, and I got a copy here. I'll hold it up for the people who are watching. That book came about. We're spending all of our time, Stan, working with leaders on building a leadership culture and talent, as I mentioned, and engagement and execution, all this culture stuff. A lot of great stuff, and will help any company get better and get more aligned and engaged. And ultimately, we say execution, you're planting the flag, you're trying to do what it is you're trying to do, you're delivering on that. That's all great. But I had all these executives I talked to who kept telling me we're taking what you guys are talking about and things are getting better at work, but what things are not so great outside of work. The people that were coaching, they kept talking about work-life balance, and I can't find enough time to have the family that I want. And I'm just really struggling there. And so Winning Begins at Home came about because of those conversations. I thought I just couldn't find anything out there for leaders to help them build really the family life that they want. Or it may not even be family. It may just be, how do I take care of my body and my energy and my money and all that stuff outside of work kind of stuff. And what, my line that I say in the book, or kind of start with, and I got this from several conversations I had with people, was I believe if you win at work and you lose at home, I think you still lose. I don't think the goal is to build a great company, great business, great firm, and then blow up the things that are outside of work. I mean, I don't know anybody who's saying, I don't really care if I went outside of work or not. And, I'm kind of from the old school, the old 9 to 5 and we don't talk about that anymore. And I understand people work remotely and they work all the time. But what happens from 5 to 9 to me is maybe more important. I think it actually positions us to win from 9 to 5. And so that's where winning begins at home came from, that whole work-life balance challenge. And we started that conversation that came out this past June. And we got a lot of leaders and companies that we're doing all this other work with on culture and talent and, the stuff we mentioned. And they're saying, hey, can you help us here? And so that book's been a great resource to help leaders there as well.
Okay, so I totally buy into the thesis of that. Give me a takeaway or two that I can, something I can go home with today and do differently.
Yeah, that's great. So I'll just give you a couple of fundamentals. So one of the things we do is we do some work with sports teams, college teams, pro teams, and sports is kind of an easy, it's an easy one to think about the fundamentals. It's football season. We think about blocking and tackling, right? I mean, there's some fundamentals to winning in football. We understand that. But the same thing's true in music. If you went to music, there's chords and the scales. I'm not a musician, but there are some fundamentals to making music. And when I started thinking about home, I thought, what are the fundamentals to win outside of work? What are the fundamentals if you want to have a great marriage or you want to be a good mom or dad? What are the fundamentals there? And we have a couple of them. I'll mention them. I'll give you an idea. You said you want to take away, so I'll give you an idea. So the first one, we talk about, how do you love first? How do you love first? When you go home, this is our response. It's when we get in a conversation with somebody, and isn't it true that we get in a conversation and we think it's okay if I blow up on this person? We live together. We know that's not okay, and yet we feel like we can kind of let our hair down, and next thing you know, we're in conflict, and that's really not the goal. So what if we would start to love first? And I'll give you here's a specific way. I've really tried to work on this through the years. My wife and I have 4 daughters. They're all grown up now and married, and we got some, 8 little grandkids now. But back in the day, and even now with the little ones, I've asked myself a question. I think this question would be helpful to all your listeners. How do I live my life in such a way that the people who know me the best actually love me the most? I think it's easy for the people who know me the best. I hear this all the time. The people who know them the best, there's so many leaders. People know them the best. They respect them the least. They're one way at work, but they come home and it's like I said a minute ago, they don't treat them the way they should, or my wife tells me saying it louder doesn't make you more right, so we're harsh with people or we're loud with people and we don't listen first, and so I think this loving first. And I would say one specific thing you could do is just focus on trying to be there when you're there. I think with technology, I got my little phone here beside me. We can't go anywhere without our phone these days, right? And that technology, you go into a restaurant and you look around a table and you'll see a mom and dad, maybe a couple kids, and a couple of them are scrolling social media and somebody's on their Game Boy and dad's checking messages from work. And the next thing you know, they're together, but they're really not together in that moment when they should be. So I think when I go home, I want to leave work at work, and that I may work at home. And so that becomes very hard. Can I create a barrier between my office, a doorway? When I walk through that, I'm literally going to, in my mind, I'm going to flip and I'm going to go and be with the people that I'm with. So that's the love first. And then the second fundamental I would say is to live last. And that's about really being a servant leader. I believe the servant leaders are the best leaders. I think they're the ones who are not just even at home. If you think about it at work, the best boss, the best husband or wife, or wherever you go, that's the person who's always thinking, how do I help somebody else win? And I think servant leadership has a bad rap because I think some people think, I don't want to be the doormat. That's not. A servant leader is willing to tell somebody the truth. They're willing to hold somebody accountable. But they're also willing they live last by allowing somebody else to have an opportunity or pushing somebody else in the light. I love the example of an offensive lineman in football. I think so many times we think of football players, if you love football or hate football, the first person, if I said name a football player, probably be a quarterback that would come to mind. Everybody loves the quarterbacks. They talk about them all the time. Nobody's thinking about the left guard for the Arizona Cardinals or the right tackle for the Missouri Tigers. I mean, we don't even know who those people are, and yet they're the ones who are showing up game after game, and they're opening up a hole so somebody else can score. And I think servant leaders live that way. When you go home, if you can help your spouse win, if you can help your kids win, you have that mindset. I just think what's it going to do? It's going to cause the people who know you the best to love you the most. And so that's kind of the way I think about it. I mean, it's, pretty simple stuff. Blocking and tackling is simple, but it's amazing how many teams don't do that. And then they wonder why they struggle year after year. And I think at home, if we don't have intent and we don't have focus on doing the things that we know to do, we shouldn't be surprised when our families are struggling. But if we do the right things, family life can be really great. I mean, we've probably all had moments where our families work the right way and it's going, this is incredible. I think we always tell organizations, hope is not a strategy. And I think the same thing is true at home. You can't just say, I hope things get better. You got to go and you got to behave your way to where you want to go, I think. And so, yeah, love first, live last. We think those are the fundamentals.
I heard put the cell phone away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my wife is gonna listen to this podcast interview, and I'm sure she's gonna be calling it to my attention with great regularity. So I want to get in front of that. So a lot of this wisdom, a lot of this advice, I'm listening pretty carefully to what you're saying because this is pretty relevant to me. I work from home more often. I'm at home working more than I'm at my office working. And there is a challenge in defining the boundary between that office back there and what happens sitting at the kitchen counter in conversation with my wife. It's easy to bring the cell phone in and be responding to emails. And, it's not uncommon that I've seen her look at me with that look of almost hurtful frustration of like, I'd really like some of your attention now. And
Yeah.
Good. So I know, there's a lot to mine here, and you had a couple other channels that you talked about, and we have time to like do like a quick dive into maybe one more.
Yeah, that's great. So let's think about I think it maybe serve your audience best to talk about the organization here for a second. So we use a picture of a pyramid, and in the pyramid, there's 4 layers to it. If you can kind of picture from the bottom to the top, the base of that pyramid is leadership. And so if I was talking to an organization, the first place we start, a lot of organizations, we'll do a 2-year agreement and we'll help them build a leadership culture. But it starts with the leader, the point leader, or the leadership team really setting the pace. People always watch the leader. And I think that's that sometimes nobody's ever taught us how to lead, how to build a team, or how to lead a meeting, or just some of the little fundamentals of leadership. And so that leadership piece, really important. We start with the fundamentals of leadership. Secondly, we talk about alignment. That's where our culture stuff fits. That's where our talent stuff fits. You want to have people aligned around what it is you're trying to do, vision-wise, vision, values, your system structures, all those things. Anybody who's listening right now, your business is actually, it's designed perfectly to give you your current results. And so if you want something different, you're going to need to either align people differently, or you're going to need to talk about it differently. You're going to have to do something different. Different is not always better, Stan, but better is always different. And so people would need to make a step and say, we got to do something to align people. And I use the example of, if you have I don't do any rowing or anything, but I've seen there's a place where I go and there's a lake and they have a skull, basically. They do some sculling over there, rowing. And if everybody is working together and they're rowing together, that thing will go through the water so fast, it's crazy. But if you get a couple of people that are rocking the boat and a couple of people that are rowing the boat, it just doesn't go as efficiently. And I think in the same way, an organization who has a lack of alignment, there's maybe some negativity. I don't think you can go to a positive place with negative people. You said it earlier. You've got to have alignment. And so that's a huge piece. The third one is the engagement. We talked about that. I won't say anymore. But the fourth one, I will say something about execution. This is where we teach, and we have a process to train people to do the right thing the right way every time. I know it sounds like that cannot happen, but it's phenomenal when you start teaching people how to do things and what to do, rather than, let's say you're going to promote me, you're my leader, and you're training to me as, hey, Randy, if you need anything, just let me know. Well, that's not I'm not prepared. I'm not ready. I'm not, and then 6 weeks later, you're frustrated because I hadn't said anything, but I'm not really doing the work that you need me to be doing. And so I think so many organizations are just kind of duct taped together. This execution piece is big. I'll give one warning here. I think so many leaders like to talk about execution. They're like, that's where we make our money and that's where we make our difference. We always say that's dangerous to focus only on execution and leave the other stuff out. We think that's like the gymnast. We had the Olympics during the summer, right? And the gymnast, could you imagine the gymnast saying, I just want to do the dismount? Well, that's fun, I'm sure, to fly through the air and stick the landing. But if she doesn't understand that the momentum and the energy of the entire routine is what's going to propel her to stick that landing, points will be left on the table. And I think in the same way, the company, the organization that doesn't understand, we've got to be well led, we've got to be aligned, and we've got to have our people engaged. Those are the things that position you to stick the landing. You will be judged on whether, you stick the landing or not. If it's a financial planner, the money needs to grow. And if it's if it's FedEx, the package better arrive or whatever. I mean, you pick your thing. It's got the Chick-fil-A, the food's got to be hot and the place better be clean. And it really, if you say my pleasure, it better be your pleasure. But at the end of the day, it's leadership alignment and engagement that are the enablers to help people stick the landing no matter what they're trying to do. So that would be my last little word there on the organizational stuff, the stuff we talk to companies about. And pretty cool when people, start at a place and go, we know we're capable of more. And then they start embracing these things. And again, we call ourselves practitioners. We're going to give organizations stuff to practice. We think you practice your way to results. And so, anyway, I'll leave it there.
It's good. So we can drill deeper in it with your book, Winning Begins at Home. That's available where?
You can get it Barnes & Noble or Amazon, anywhere you get your books. It is available on an audio version. That's going to give you the outside of work stuff. If you're looking for any of the resources, I'll mention a couple of things that might be helpful to your audience. We have a website, leadeveryday.com, and there we've got a store with all the resources we've created for Chick-fil-A and other companies. All that stuff's available: books, field guides, quick start guides, videos, journals, all kind of stuff. And then we also have an academy that we've created, which you may have some listeners who are interested in video modules to do some training in their own companies. And they can go to leadeverydayacademy.com and get some insight on that. And then if they don't want to pay for anything, they can go. Mark Miller and I do we do a podcast as well, Monday through Friday, about 10 minutes a day. And basically we're trying to help people become a better leader, improve team performance, and ultimately strengthen their organization. So a lot of resources that would be available to help people. And, that's our heart.
Randy, this has been incredibly useful. I will say this has been incredibly useful to me. And I'm really sure that a lot of people listening to this right now would agree with that. And we can learn more from the book and learn more if we connect with those resources. We'll make sure that all of those resources get posted so it'll be easy for our listeners to find. Randy, it's been a pleasure. This has really been a pleasure having you today. I'm saying it's been a pleasure and useful for me personally, and I'm sure that is true for just about anybody who's listening to this right now. And so let me say thank you for spending some time this afternoon with me.
Well, thank you, Stan. I appreciate all you do. And anybody's listening, let's just keep doing the best we can. I think when leaders get better, everything around them gets better. So that'd be my final word.
Great. So this is the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Stan Miller. Our guest today has been Randy Gravitt. Randy is the CEO, and that would be the Chief Encouragement Officer at Lead Every Day. So thanks for the time today, and thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.